Welcome, Dr. James Beckett Sports Card Insights. I want to thank my sponsors, Topps, Panini, Upper Deck, Heritage Auctions, Huggins & Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, ComC.com, and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. So here's an episode for your listening enjoyment.
Somebody recently said gambling is the root of the hobby. I couldn't disagree more. Gambling may be a very thick branch of the hobby right now, but you can chop that branch off and the hobby will still go on, right? Roots of the hobby are the collectors like him and like you back in the day and still now, because the funny part is people are amazed you're rooting around dollar boxes. Like I say, you're grazing, right? That takes work, that takes effort, and it produces joy. If you 2x a card out of the dollar box, I know it gives you a thrill, right?
I'm disappointed.
Okay. 2x is good, right? Come on.
5x.
5x. Okay. Yeah. 5x on a 50-cent card is a pretty big deal for you then. But to me, that's the root of the hobby. People that get that gratification, that joy, the time passing. You talk about sorting and you spilled a box and you didn't want to go back and resort it. I get that. But we've spent so much of our lives sorting and pondering and imagining and stuff like that. That to me is the root of the hobby, whether you're a set collector, a team collector, a player collector, whatever.
The root of evil is not money and it's not gambling. In fact, the biblical quote, it's the love of money is the root of evil. So by corollary, the love of gambling is the root of evil. If you let gambling become a love, become an addiction to you, it's a problem. We gamble when we wake up and decide what shirt to put on. We're making choices. I'm paying money on this and I'm hoping it'll go up. I'm gambling, it'll go up. But when it becomes addiction, you're in love with the action of gambling.
That's your motivation.
That is evil. Then it's overcoming you. Every novel in the world is good versus evil, and evil triumphs sometimes when it gets out of control.
Yeah, I just think that that's disappointing. And Bo had said, oh, that person actually collects vintage and collects Vennies. And I'm like, what kid in Venezuela was thinking they were gambling when they were opening a pack of Venezuelans and gluing them?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? There's no gamble there. That was joy and accomplishment. It saddens me that is the mindset of some people.
Is the thrill of gambling placing the bet or finding out that you won or you lost? I don't consider I'm gambling in the problematic way because I love the process, evaluating all the options. I'm way more cerebral than put big money on a game because I supposedly think I have inside information about who's going to win the bowl game. Life is unpredictable. Even card values are unpredictable. We did monthly price guides. Cards went up, cards went down. And even though I thought I probably have a pretty good idea what's going to go up next month, I'm not infallible. It was a hunch, but I wasn't going to publish it. I'd wait till the next month and yep, that went up. That one went down. I didn't realize that would happen.
Have you ever thought about the impact those magazines and the monthly pricing had on the way people collected?
If you contrast it with now it's not anarchistic, but like you said, it's no longer analog. It's not black and white. It's all these different shades of gray. The pace setting dealers, the dealers with the biggest megaphones, the collectors with the biggest megaphones, the influencers shape public opinion. I think we were not touting things as much as we were trying to tell it like it was.
I know you were reporting empirical data.
Even though people thought, oh, you're predicting the prices. No, we were empirically, as much as possible, trying to say, this is what it was selling for at the time of press. Okay. That's not the mindset. People want to know what it's going to be, because if they think it's going to double in price, they don't mind paying 50% more. But that's speculation. And that's gambling. I don't believe it's gambling if it's a game of skill. But they have convinced themselves that they have skill that I don't think they have.
Now, contrast that with the 70s. How many collectors, when you were a dealer, were thinking that if I can buy this 1967 Roberto Clemente for $5, it's going to be worth $10 in a couple of years? I think the mindset of the collector would have been different back then, right? It was more of adding to a collection as opposed to thinking of an ROI.
I thought, this is a $5 Roberto Clemente. I need it. And I wanted to buy it for $250.
Right.
It never entered my mind that it's going to be worth $10.
And most of the people that you would have sold to.
In fact, for the better cards, they would say NFS, not for sale. They'd say, what do you got to trade? So I would trade something that I perhaps had a bunch of, or that they wanted. That was their local, their favorite player. I got some Herb Washingtons for you, John. Then you'd say, oh, okay, let me bring out my good stuff. Trading was a bigger deal. There was a sense of community. And this bit me a couple of times because it just was the ethos of the day, is that if I had a set, let's say it's a 500 in card set, and I need 5 cards, and somebody has those 5 cards. Somebody else has 300 cards out of the 572 and wants those 5 cards from the same dealer. That dealer's going to sell it to me, probably going to give me a better deal because the spirit of completing sets was very important. In fact, I had some rare cards from rare sets that I would never be able to complete because they were just too scarce. But if I made the mistake of bringing it to a card show, somebody might see it or they'd tell their friend and say, hey, you're looking for that card. It was really hard to say no when they said, look, it's the last card I need for that set. You have it. You have to trade it to me. And you couldn't extort them because, again, it was a small community then. You could extract a good price, pretty much value for value, but you could get something equally rare. But it was really hard to say no. That happened to me. Bill Mastro, super advanced collector, 40 years ago.
He bought a card from me on eBay this year, which is crazy. I'm talking about a card like from 2004. But go ahead.
Okay, well, good. But he's a man after my own heart now.
Yeah.
This was in the 70s, and I had a card. It was the last card he needed, and he was politely, or not so politely, badgering me. Said, hey, you got to trade that to me. First of all, he said, you don't. I have that card because it's impossible. I said, actually, I got it. He didn't call me a liar. He said, just prove it.
He was calling you out.
So I brought it the next show. He said, well, I got to have it. And I said, when I get ready to sell my collection, I'll think of you first. And he said, no, I need it now. He said, you're never going to complete that set. I have every card except that one.
You fell right into his trap.
I got in the hobby. He was one of the leading collectors. And actually, I'm older than he is, but I was one of the young guys coming into the Midwest there. And he was so knowledgeable, and we were friends. And you're at these shows and you're behind the table, and he always had great taste. He was educating me on why that was a scarce card. So he was contributing to my knowledge as well, because this is before I did price guides. Me having access to guys like that and their knowledge base, and me being a straight shooter.
We're in a world of influencers now in our hobby. You've influenced me. 1970 was a big year for me when I got your book for Christmas. Prior to then, who was influencing your collecting and dealing the most? Is there anybody? I know none of us are made by the impressions of one person, but there has to be somebody, one or two people that influenced you at that period, late 60s, 70s.
First guy, late 60s, was Gervis Ford, the leading collector in Dallas, and became a great friend. He was 7 years older than me. He's very retired now, but had a fabulous collection. We were partners in the store, partners in show promoting. We started a collecting club, and he was the prime mover around here and just a fabulous friend, wonderful guy, knew his family, couldn't have had a better start. That was my introduction to the organized hobby. Number two would be maybe Randy Root up in Toledo. He's the guy in 75. We started buying trips. He had his own business. So he had some extra funds, very knowledgeable, straight shooter. We did buying trips all over Ohio and did great. And we split the stuff. And the third guy, probably Denny Eckes. I maybe would have done the price guides without Denny, but him coming up to me and saying, look, I know you can do this. I will do everything else. You just do what I know you can do. I'll handle all the rest, and it will make beautiful music. Those were three guys I connected with and got me launched. After that, there have been many others since then. I'm really enjoying working with Rich Klein. I worked with Ford and all the people in the company. But in the early days, in the 70s, probably those three guys.
How different do you think your collecting, and you could say your life, right? Because eventually your business impacted your life greatly. If you had taken a job at Gonzaga instead of in the Rust Belt, how different do you think things would have turned out? Because the Rust Belt seemed like,
for me,
for you personally, and obviously for the hobby, there seemed to be a lot of opportunities in that area where you posted up at Bowling Green.
My interviews when I was a young PhD and thinking about getting a teaching position were at Texas A&M, which would have been the wrong direction for cards, Southern California, which probably would have been good. In fact, when I went over for my interview trip, I met with Gavin Riley and a bunch of the leading collectors in the Southern Cal area, and that would have been cool. I didn't have anything up in the Pacific Northwest like Gonzaga. I had one interview in Buffalo, which was 30 below zero when I was there, but met some collectors there. Then the week after I went to Buffalo, I went to Bowling Green. It was only 20 below zero, and I thought, wow. I, again, met some collectors there.
Right.
The faculty there were big sports fans. And here I am teaching statistics. So I really thought this is going to be cool. A nice college, equidistant from Detroit and Cleveland and Cincinnati and Columbus and
Right.
Pittsburgh, even Chicago wasn't that far away, Indianapolis. So it was perfect.
But you didn't take that job strategically
Yes,
because of your cards.
I took it on balance of everything, and the cards were part of it. Yes.
Okay. That's interesting because, like I said, I feel like if you had been anywhere else, then maybe things would not have turned out the same way.
That may be true. Looking back, being in Bowling Green was providential.
I've stayed at the Holly Lodge in Bowling Green, Ohio. It might have been the worst day off I ever had in my life. It's hard to think that you built an empire in Bowling Green, Ohio.
I was a single professor. I played intramurals. I'd go over to the rec center. It was just right.
Right.
I wouldn't have gone to New York City, but there
Right.
was a huge group in New York City that were movers and shakers. Philly, there were a lot of collectors there. Baltimore, DC, that area. There were pockets of collectors and strong pockets. Southern California was huge. But at Bowling Green, I got a small town base and I
Right.
had access to all those great cities. And of those cities, Detroit was the epicenter.
Yeah, it was a big pool and it wasn't very
The big
crowded,
ones.
right?
In
Yeah.
Chicago, Detroit and Chicago were huge. You mentioned to me about the Ted Williams card company being ahead of its time back in those days. I was there and I was aware, and those guys came and pitched us for things. They weren't a major company. So, how did they get away with all these really innovative and interesting subsets? Just a lot of creativity. One of the guys that was the prime mover in that, not Ted, was a marketing, he'd like it if I called him a whiz, but he was a marketing pro, really was heavy into the marketing and really saw that having a lot of hooks in the product was good. So this guy, I think, really was good. But it would not have happened without the name Ted Williams
Sure.
opening doors. Even Topps, you thought Topps could have done that. No, Topps was Cy Berger, but Ted Williams, the splendid splinter, was revered and put on a pedestal. And he was a little bit crusty. He was the man, potentially the greatest hitter of all time.
The greatest. Don't give me the potentially. He was the greatest hitter of all time. Not the greatest baseball player, but the greatest hitter of all time. Pretty good hands, too, back there, 93, 94. Who else was putting out cards of baseball legends? There were some swell cards and there was
And
some
high grade and those
TCMA, beautiful looking cards, right?
But Ted integrated them in with a set. Some of them were inserts and things like
The
that.
Negro Leagues and the
Give
women's.
them equal
Yeah.
standing. I know that he was ahead of his time. I think that was a function of him.
We all know his Hall of Fame speech, which was epic, right? It brought the Negro Leagues to the forefront for the Hall of Fame, but I don't recall too many modern players in that. There were a handful in those sets, maybe, but very limited.
I know, but he probably did individual licensing.
Yeah, individual. But he
Well,
had
that's-
some more recent people like Mike Schmidt, who just retired.
I know, but you don't to knock on the door saying, I'm representing Ted Williams. Do you want to be
It opens
it
doors.
opens the doors.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you got to send out form letters or something like that.
But that's
So
brilliant,
it was-
right?
Only he could pull it off. And when he went to do the football set, and I don't know that he was close buddies with Roger Staubach, but Staubach's down here, really quality guy as well. He said, Roger Staubach, I want you to be the flag bearer
Forward facing. Yeah.
face of it. And Roger was not super involved, other than like Roger was trying to do a real estate guy
Right.
with us. And so he'll knock on the door and say, hey, Jim, it's Roger. I said, hey, Roger, it's good to see you. He said, we need to get your listing for your building. And I said, I've already got it listed with somebody else. He said, how many Super Bowl rings do they have?
Opens doors.
And he was a good guy and all that.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, those names open doors because they just were legends.
I don't know between 93 and 1934, but does that not remind you of Lou Gehrig says?
Anybody that was above reproach, an amazing guy. Babe Ruth was carousing and stuff like that. Lou Gehrig was Columbia. He was
Right.
an apple pie guy. And so, yeah, Lou Gehrig says.
Ted Williams had a set in 59 as well. Talk about a pioneer. He had his own set while in his playing days. And then later on, he was, as you say, the face of that set. They were good looking cards on the front. The backs left a lot to be desired. But for somebody like myself in 1993, I was 25 years old. And it was the first chance of seeing those old players in real photos. You know, the 60 Fleers cards didn't do justice to the old players. The 76 Sporting News all-time greats was about as close as we got. But to see all those players was pretty cool.
Okay, we're moving into an era of fanatics owning kind of all the licenses other than hockey. And so because of that, Panini is going to be forced to become more like Leaf, signing individual players and doing boutique kinds of things. What the Ted Williams experience suggests is that a startup company, because it's not that hard to produce cards, if they had a door opener, could wind up coming in and doing some really interesting sets. For example, your field of music. If some music promoter said, you know what, I'm going to sign up some of these acts, and it's going to be a little bit of co-op, and we're going to sign acts individually, and there's going to be some experiences and some inserts and some and concert used and stuff like that.
Right.
You could bootstrap that and get it going if you had the strength of the name. Because Leaf, and we're finding out now that Leaf was not all Brian Gray, but Leaf was mostly Brian Gray getting off the ground of his energy.
Yeah, but whoever closes those deals, right?
But
Whoever
now,
the closer is.
and they have legs, and he has good people there that are there now, Greg Cohn and all that stuff. Okay, Panini has a lot of good people. We will see how nimble they are. They're a big company. They've got to think now like a small company and think about being nimble and looking for niches that they can grow.
Well, they have to go get it because
they've got to go get it.
It was coming to them. Yeah. Panini did a lot of rock stuff in the early 70s, right? Which was really
cool. Like Ted Williams, that once the word got out that Ted Williams was doing a set, maybe they contacted him and said, hey, I want to be part of this, Ted.
It wasn't immediate, but eventually led to, in the early 2000s, a proliferation of everybody putting out cards of the old legends. Everybody did it. Upper Deck did it. Fleer did it. Donruss did. So that part, now it's normal. I had a stack of cards in my hand here, 2024s, that have Josh Gibson's in there, but I have Mel Ott, I have Fisk, I have Bob Gibson. Now that is normal to have that but it's brilliant because I buy those cards. Now I don't buy them out of boxes. I'd rather pay $2 for those cards than $5 for a pack of cards that I'll get a Carlton Fisk or a Mel Ott and 10 other guys I don't care about. That hasn't left the manufacturers at all, which is great.
Oh, no, it's a new arrival, because if you go back far enough, the licensing agreements were structured so that the Players Association did not allow you to include non-association members. And the only one that was getting around that was Topps, because they were signing individually back.
And the Hall of Fame as well was licensing.
It wanted a pure set and not this Frankenstein set.
Right.
And now they're realizing, hey, if I put some old guys and some new guys, it's something for everybody. Because when I'm looking in the dollar box, it's mainly newer guys, but there's some older guys in there too. I'm equal opportunity. If it's
where do you think Heritage goes from here? Because there's a lot of talk amongst me and my friends. We're in agreement that 75 is the pinnacle. I know you're sick of hearing me talk about 1975, but Heritage, a lot of people really love those sets. I feel like from 75 now they've crested and it's going to be downhill from here. I don't know whether that's a good thing. How many people are jazzed up about 76 and 77 sets? I like 76 and 77, but 79, just wonder where that brand goes from here.
Yeah, but you're wondering because of your age.
Yeah, you're right, because
there's the 20-year rule or the 25-year rule.
Yeah, but people younger than me are saying that, which surprises me. Aesthetically, people look at it and they don't see any thrill in the 76 set. He doesn't have any nostalgia attached to it. So
we had these discussions back in the day. Where do you draw the line for vintage? And we decided to draw it between 79 and 80, that the 70s are vintage and the 80s are not. Okay. And so Ricky Henderson's on one side.
No, you were wrong, by the way. But go ahead.
Okay. But most of the discussion is about vintage being a lot newer, that vintage goes up the Upper Deck to 89. Right. What you're suggesting, which I'm closer to accepting, is that the last vintage set was 75, because 76 and 77 and 78 and 79 are not wonderful sets.
They were mailing it in. They were getting away from the inserts, design, right?
The quality control, all that stuff. 75, the design was interesting, and because of the
it was contemporary, that's
color borders, you've got condition rarities that are fun. And we did on the buying trips, we didn't even want stuff in the 70s. In fact, it was like 63 and back. Of course, that was in the mid 70s.
Yeah, Facebook Marketplace is littered with vintage cards from the 90s now in all the descriptions. But to me, it's easy, right? 80 is when the monopoly ended. From then on, everything changes with manufacturers, traded sets, the whole shebang. So that's the
81 Donruss being vintage.
It's not. It's on the other side of it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but that's what we love about sports, and that's what we love about cards, the debates, and it's subjective.
But you and I are both in the category older is better than newer.
For sure.
So the tie is going to go to the older.